Welcome to another episode of Live from the Wish House with me, Cris Spinner. If you're a regular, welcome back. And if it's your first time, I'm so happy you're joining us. My path profoundly changed when my son was diagnosed with autism. My marriage collapsed, and I began to develop my own Cris philosophies to navigate and thrive. So I'm here to connect with you to share and learn, and together we can open our minds to creating a life we love to live. So please subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, leave your comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and stories. Control. I'm doing a 3-episode, small, limited series on control. It's an interesting word because when we hear the word control, it conjures up a few things, and most of those things have angst attached to them. Probably because for the most part, we know we don't have much control, but we want it. We think we're going to feel better about things if we can have it. We think there's a possibility for us to be in complete control. We need to have some control in our lives to feel ordered. But I'm here to tell you that the only piece of control that we do have is choice. And I'm going to talk about this in 3 parts. We're going to start with the real big angst of the word control. So when I think of the word control, what comes to my mind, what comes to top of mind, the first thing that I think about is others having control over me. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants others to have control over us. And no matter your age, you've all experienced that. Now, to the extent that you've experienced it is different for all of us. For me, I started with control in childhood. I struggle today with the residuals of the control that I was introduced to in childhood. And in very many instances, very well-meaning control. So who are the first people that have control over our lives? Our parents. I come from a 2-parent family, and they were both strong-willed Italian Roman Catholics, as I've told you before. So if you're a person that grew up in the 60s and 70s and you had that kind of a home environment, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But all kidding aside, I grew up in a 2-parent family where my parents wanted to be in control. They wanted everything to go great for us. And I can understand that. These are people that came from the Depression era, the Great Depression, on to World War II and Korea. And once the Korean conflict was over, everybody set out to have a normal life. Everybody just wanted to go home, create a home, have a family, and keep their life. That's why there's a little nickname for that period of time. It's the lockstep 50s, the lockstep 60s. Because everybody, when we look back, when my generation looks back on our pictures from our holidays, especially Easter, we still, to this day, my cousins and I send pictures of ourselves at Easter time where we looked so ordered, so controlled. Everybody had the little patent leather shoes. Everybody had the same dresses and the same bonnets. How we looked, what our rooms looked like, what our homes looked like was part and parcel of the control that the people of that generation needed to have. It was a sense of ordering. And I think it spilled into our upbringings as well. For me, I can tell you it definitely spilled into my upbringing. My parents controlled everything that I did from a young age. Now, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know I've talked about this and having an identity crisis through most of my life because even down to who I was as a young person and what I thought I would want to do was controlled. I was a very precocious young musician, and my parents saw that and encouraged that, especially my mom. Now, when I say that, I think my dad too, but in different ways. And I think that they saw that precociousness and that excellence developing at a young age as a way to capitalize on something that would make my future be really great. So I think they thought, okay, she has great musical talent. We're going to push her in that direction. She's going to be a performer. And in our days, we were raised, half of my listening audience won't know who these people are, and half of them will. The Osmonds and the the DeFranco family, and of course the most famous, the Jackson family. We were raised with that mantra of if you're really good, someone's going to discover you and then you're going to be famous. And I was quite good. And I think my parents thought that that was a way to get me economically situated for my future. And as I grew up, the more and more I thought, I love music, I love writing, I love performing, but I don't know what column that fits in my life. Is that something I want to do for the rest of my life as a career? Is that something that I'd like to do as a hobby? Is it something I would enjoy doing on a local level, maybe join the local chorus or be in the community theaters? I don't know. To this day, at 68, I don't know what would have come from parents who guided me rather than controlled me, albeit with a good set of intentions. I don't know what that would have looked like. All I do know is that when I would come home and come up with something else, I've said this before, I went through a 6th grade phase, an era, if you will, of wanting to be a marine biologist. Nobody was listening to me, probably because I was not going to be a marine biologist, but who knew if I was going to be a marine biologist? I certainly didn't know. And all of those ideas were always kind of pushed to the side. They'd be entertained just for a quick conversation, but my choices were already laid out in front of me without me having made them. And so I grew up in that control umbrella. I also grew up in a very strict set of values and morals, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I didn't think growing up that I had options. Now, I'm a very effervescent person, an enthusiastic person, and I live life loud, as they say. So you wouldn't think that as a child, I wasn't the same way. I was that way in my performance life, but in my personal real life, I was under the control of what my parents said I should do, who I should be, what age I should date. And that sounds very normal to the most of us listening and saying, yeah, well, of course you need to guide your children. But there wasn't any guiding. There was just kind of a telling. This is what is going to happen. I did not think I have options, and I've said this 100 times in my episodes. My brother knew he had options. 2 years younger than me, his life was an option at all costs. If my father said come in at a certain time, he knew that if he didn't, that what actually was going to happen. So yeah, there was a lot of yelling and the go to your room and the time's out and the whatever it is you have as a young person. But he pushed the limits. I never pushed the limits. I was maybe comfortable in the control, or it was something that I grew up with. So I didn't feel there was much of an option, much of a choice to say, hey, I want to do this, or I'm going to do that. So I have no stories of teen rebellion when I'm sitting with my friends and everybody's telling all the stories, sneaking out of your house and doing all the things that kids will sometimes do. The rebellious stage was not mine. In fact, and I've said this before, my rebellious stage was referred to by my parents when they were alive as when I turned 16 and started to push back against what it was I thought I wanted to do. That was rebellious to my parents, that I started thinking, well, I love psychology. I'd love to teach. I love education. I was drawn to those two things, and that was my rebellious stage. Most parents would think that's great. Here comes my kid. She wants to be a psychologist or a teacher. Yay. But they weren't happy. They were continually on my music track, if you will. And my music track was big. My performance track was big. I performed all over the state. I was constantly in the newspapers in those days. That's how, we don't have the social media today. So if the old time social media was newspapers, I was in newspapers. People were coming to my home, interviewing me. I was like a little local celebrity, but uncomfortable in that because I don't ever think I chose it. And so without the freedom of choice comes the control of somebody else. And even though that was a different era for our parents, a different generation, I don't want to say it did the damage, but for lack of a better word, it did the damage of us who were living under those kind of parental guidelines, feel that control through most of our lives. And we feel it anyway, right? We go to school, teachers are in control, right? You go to your local religious establishment and the leaders of that are in control. Your parents are in control. And I think that because there's so many controlling people in our lives, if we don't find the way out of that, then we as adults tend to gravitate toward people who are controlling. For me, I gravitated towards friends who were controlling, towards relationships. And I'm not saying relationships controlling in a scary way. But I was happy to kind of hand over my power to other people who thought other things. Oh yeah, don't wear that dress. Meanwhile, I loved the dress. I have a friend, she's going to hear this podcast and she's going to laugh, but she was a very ordered person. And when we were in college, we had a snack bar in our dorm. And we would go down there when the first start of frozen yogurt came. I remember it was like the biggest thing, frozen yogurt. And we would go down and get frozen yogurt with raspberry sauce on it and coconut. It was the best thing ever. And we would walk from the snack bar in the dorm to our elevator and ride up to our rooms to have our snack. But we would be eating the yogurt on the way. We'd be in the elevator trying to eat the yogurt. But not when my friend was in the elevator, because she wouldn't let us. She would say, no, nobody can eat till we get back into the dorm. We laugh about it to this day. It's 40-something years later. And that story comes up at least 4 times a year, that we were not allowed to eat in the elevator. And when I look back, we would giggle about it and look at each other. But I was happy to acquiesce, all the while rebelling inside. So there's like 2 things going on at once. Like, why don't I just say, I'm eating the damn yogurt because I want to? Like, you don't have control over me eating yogurt in an elevator, which I'm not saying I'm angry about because it's the most hilarious thing. But I didn't. And I think it's because I was so used to being a person under someone's control that while it seemed normal, there was this whole rebellion going on inside. And so I think that we probably all have that kind of experience in our lives to different extents. Because what does that do to you when, as you age and as you're making your own choices, it makes you second guess. It makes you not feel close enough to your own worth. We hear that statement all the time, know your worth. It looks so great on paper, and the little frosting on the cake of that is so easy to understand. It's basically, I know who I am, and I know I'm a good person, and I know I can contribute to an intimate relationship, a friendship relationship, a job relationship, relationships with our parents, our siblings. I can contribute, and I can contribute as a whole person, and I know who I am, and I want to be able to set up boundaries that will help me to exert myself. But when you don't have those skills, yes, you know that, but it's underneath. It's so hard to execute that. It's not enough for people such as myself who've grown up in a controlling environment to feel safe enough within themselves to exert themselves. So I'm going to say that one more time. It's not enough for those of us who have grown up in a controlling environment to feel confident enough to exert ourselves in an authentic way. It's not being angry or having pushback for pushback's sake. It's simply knowing yourself well enough. And when your foundation is one of control and one where you exponentially feel comfortable within that control, whilst knowing there's like a little rebel underneath that doesn't really know how to come out, you find yourself oftentimes in an adult situation, not able to stand up for yourself, not able to weather the storms that come your way, because storms are coming our way. And that sounds so flippant to say, but it is so true. I often think that, we're all going to have something. We don't escape. We don't escape life without something. And sometimes a lot of somethings. I think the older you are, the longer you live, the more some things get thrown at you that you cannot control. And so as I go through this little series and we get to part 3, we're going to be talking about how to get it so that that control is minimized and that the freedom comes from that and that you're able to execute that confidence and know how to put control in its place, know how to kick control to the curb, if you will. So I have some homework for you on this first episode. I want you to think about your own life as you're listening to this, because this might strike a chord with you. So think about this in your leisure time, when you're walking, when you're just drinking your coffee or meal prepping, or those times when you can just kind of speak to yourself. Where did the control come from in your life? And is it still affecting you? And if that's happening, you're in the right place with me, because I do have some good answers around this, because I was there and now I'm not. And I think also asking yourself, where is control showing up in your life? Is it putting up a barrier to your growth? Are you someone that feels the need for control, either by receiving it or by becoming the controlling person? Here's what I can tell you. It's not a freeing thing. Control, the umbrella of control, is not freeing. And we're going to talk about how to switch that up right here next time at the Wish House.